You're listening to the She Lift Project podcast, a show dedicated to helping women achieve higher levels of success in the workplace. No matter where you are in your career, we want to help you grow. Now here's your host, Cynthia Kirkpatrick, a CPA, CFP, and Senior Financial Advisor at Moneta Group.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the She Lift Project podcast. I'm Cynthia Kirkpatrick. Thanks for joining us. And today we're going to hear from Lauren Cohen. You are the founder, owner, CEO of Cohen Leadership Group. And we're going to talk today about how you help people, leaders, companies. I loved what you wrote here, boost energy, engagement, and purpose in the workplace. And the other piece I loved was that it's possible to lead with passion and purpose. Amazing. Thanks for
having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming today. And I look forward to sharing your story because it is one of, it's not linear. It's not a straight shot. And you were sharing so many different, milestones and obstacles that really helped lead you to where you're at today. So I think people will be energized and shocked by your entire story.
Shocking. It is not linear, that's for sure.
Well, and really, we often just start with today, what you're doing today, the whole, the leadership, the coaching, building your own brand and company. When you go somewhere networking or you're out there, what do you tell people that you do? And put it in better words than I did to start.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Thank you so much for having me. And really, it's evolved over the years. But right now, we're really focused on helping leaders and teams, primarily in the middle market and primarily fast growth companies, really strengthen their leaders and strategically align their teams. And for us, that creates, when you do that, that creates more energy and more engagement for everyone because everything starts at the top and trickles its way down. So that's what we're really focused on. And our core services really break down to executive coaching, team effectiveness. We do immersive leadership development, training. We do a bunch of change management and some talent strategy.
What's the immersive leadership like? What is that?
Well, so we know a lot more than we used to know about how people want to learn. And, we try to take all of the most recent science into account when we're building programs. And so what we know is that people really have to try new skills and practice and connect with peers in order to really learn something new. So there's a 70-20, 10 rule. And so 10% of building new skill really comes from formalized training. So when you host a workshop or a formal training, it's really only going to get you about 10% of the way there. And so we call our programs immersive because we build in lots of different wraparound pieces to help people really solidify the understanding and translate it just from sort of a cognitive place to, how does it feel in my body when I practice this new skill? How about trying it on with peers, reflecting on what went well, what maybe didn't go as well, and providing support to each other. And then we also empower the participants, leaders, to engage with them, which we know also enhances the learning and the stickability, because that's really what we're looking to do, is create that long-term stickable change. So we have lots of different pieces, and it makes for a very immersive learning experience.
Right, that's a big thing. Anybody out there that's ever been to a conference or a class or whichever, and they always say, okay, write something down that you're going to walk away from here and you're going to do or you're going to reflect upon. Mm-hmm. And even then, it's
How
really
often
hard.
do you do it?
Right. That 10%.
Right.
And
so we really try to provide a full container for that learning, and the accountability is really baked in. So we've got peer success pods, and so you're expected to meet with those groups and, answer those prompts and those questions, because one of our core values as a company is impact. And so for us, structuring our programs in a way that we know is going to help clients really truly move the needle and create that impact is really important.
It's one thing to read a lot. It's one thing to practice a lot. It's totally different thing to actually do it live.
Correct.
Do it in the moment, which can be really hard, daunting, scary, all of that. So these these pods, when you talk about middle market, these pods, are they all within the same company? Are they working with, so you'll come in, grab a bunch of those people and really practice, live it, so that when they get outside of those pods, it's more habit reactionary versus they've got to think about making sure they do it.
Correct. Yeah. Usually it's an organization hires us to launch a program. So usually it's 6 months or 8 months, and it has all these different pieces. And so we'll have a kickoff and kind of explain what to expect and what's expected of them as participants. And then the pods, really the participants are chosen by the organization. So somebody with the most knowledge about, who needs to develop which leadership competencies are curating the group, and then the peer success pods are similar. So we sort of take a hands-off approach in that regard. We let the organization choose who should be in peer success pods together, and sometimes it's truly peers, and sometimes there are people at different leadership levels participating, and so it's helpful sometimes to have people with different levels of experience engaged in those conversations. And what we learn is that people also really like learning from people that are in cross-functional areas. So getting to interact with people that they don't typically meet in the company and really understanding what they do in their department or function is something that is really usually one of the biggest positives that people walk away with.
Yeah, that's great, because in big companies, you can sort of get siloed, and it's not that you don't want to see that or know that. It's just the extra effort, the time. There's so much to do in the day-to-day that in the end, I'm sure that enhances both from a relationship, hey, I know that person, and also from just an overall company knowledge that if I understand what they're doing, why, how, what they need, and vice versa, we can, be a stronger company and be stronger teams together by adding that layer of relationship.
Exactly. And also trying on some of the skills that we're teaching, like how to have a hard conversation. Sometimes it's actually more comfortable to practice that with somebody who's not in your immediate work group or on your immediate team. So they're not as involved in the situation, and there's some objectivity there. So there's some benefit.
That makes a lot of sense, because the last thing you want to do is, if there's a difficult conversation or a situation that you need to deal with on your own team, to try to practice that with someone on your own
with the team. Right, exactly. Right.
So it probably allows it to feel a little safer and, strips away a little bit of that fear of even opening yourself fully to explain the problem, the issue, to fumble along the way. And if you don't build the environment for that, you're never going to get to actually building the real skills and solving the problem.
Exactly.
Wow. And leadership is so, as I get older and you read so much, like building good leaders, training good leaders, leadership, culture, it all stems from the top. No matter what industry, anywhere, and it could be coaching a Little League team.
Yeah.
So important, maybe the most pivotal part of building a successful company.
100%. Yeah. Not only do we know that based on our lived experience and what people tell us every day in our work, but the science shows that, right? Like again and again and again, you've got companies like Gallup and Deloitte and McKinsey and, a lot of really well-respected thought leaders out there in the industry who are doing research all the time about what people want at work and what keeps people engaged. And when people are engaged, we know that they perform optimally. And so it's really, I think we're experiencing a shift. I think there's still a lot of work to do and a lot of room to grow in terms of really getting organizations and leaders inside organizations to understand that when we take a people-first approach, everybody benefits because, that's the right thing to do. And also it all trickles down to the bottom line. So, my lived experience is part of why I started this company and why I feel so passionately about creating more energy at work, because I know what it feels like to work in a high pressure, high intensity, high stakes environment and the toll that that takes on people. And so it's especially in those environments and in these high growth companies where it's very fast paced and there's a lot of pressure to perform, that I think it's all the more important to really be taking a people first approach and really thinking about what's going to engage people and excite people and help them connect to the purpose. Because we know that people want to be led. They want to feel engaged. They want to feel a sense of purpose. And I think that that's always been true, but especially coming out of COVID, I think we really started to see people's willingness to tolerate something less than that has been drastically reduced. And so that's where you saw the Great Resignation and people saying, I'm going to change careers, right? Because it's always been true that people are purpose driven and want to feel that connection. But, you know, I think there was something about everybody sitting at home on their sofa that just kind of made a flip switch, and people just really are no longer willing to tolerate working in an environment where they feel dehumanized or they feel, you know, like their sense of value and contribution isn't recognized or maybe isn't aligned to who they really are.
Yeah, I think as we're sitting here, one question that was popping in my head was, okay, think back 30 years or longer or shorter or whatever. You know, we didn't, for whatever reason, I don't think, we didn't have this sort of focus on leadership culture. You went in, you worked for the same company for 40, 50 years, your entire career. You just did your job, you went home. I don't know why there's so much difference. Some of that I think is knowledge, but some of it too is, you know, that fast pace at home, at work, everywhere we go, it's go, 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 fast paced. And our brains and our bodies are just in this elevated level of energy for so long, especially now with phones and laptops, and you can be reached. I mean, on my work phone, it could be, well, my cell phone, it's my regular cell, it's my work number, it's Microsoft Teams, they can ping me. It's email. Like,
you're accessible all the time, everywhere you go.
Maybe is that why, you know, we need then this great culture and leadership to help with that go, go, go all the time?
Right. Well, I think that so much has changed in the workplace, and the generation that you're talking about is, you know, the boomer generation, which we know is moving out of the workforce. And so there's this whole generational shift around, you know, what people expect out of a career. And I think boomers and older, for them, it was very linear, right? And it was really about stability and security, and they were just happy to have a job. And many of them stuck around in the same job for decades. And that's not the status quo anymore, right? So people are much more comfortable with change. I think we're becoming more comfortable with change, and people are more growth driven, and it's much more common to see somebody's resume look like 3 years here, 3 years here, 3 years here, and then kind of, you know, building skill and experience that way. I think a lot of organizations would tell you if they saw somebody who was at the same place for, you know, 20, 30 years, that might actually you know, shine sort of a negative light, because you'd say, well, gosh, that person's only experienced one environment. So I think just so many things have changed. The way that women are showing up in the workplace have changed, and that creates a whole different dynamic in terms of, you know, balancing work and life, as you know.
Right.
And then I think that's changed things for working fathers and all working parents too. And so I think that's created a lot of shift. And at the end of the day, people want to be people at work. And so this idea of like kind of separating your work and your life and creating balance, like some kind of scale, I think is becoming a pretty archaic concept. And we're seeing sort of the, you know, collision of both, especially with, you know, personal branding. And I think we're moving towards a place where it's more accepted to really be yourself and bring your full self to work, which is a really beautiful thing. Right. That's the kind of environment that allows people to be authentic and feel aligned with who they are. Because when you have to separate yourself at work, that really chips away at a little piece of yourself.
Yeah, I love
and I know what that feels like.
Yeah, people want to be people. They want to be people at work. They want to be people at home. I mean, that only makes sense that you would want to come to the office. And yeah, so let's say when I'm at home on the weekends, I'm not putting my makeup on. If I don't have to, I'm not doing my hair like this. I'm not dressing in this. I'm having sweats. I can't necessarily bring that into the work that I do. But what I can bring is like my personality, and I don't have to put a mask on. That would be suffocating because we're at work. We're working more than we are really doing anything else. So I love that people... the crime in it. People want to be people.
Yeah, people want to be people, and they want to be led by real people too. And I think it really takes a leader showing that it's safe to be yourself, to inspire and empower other people to, bring that side of themselves too. And so that's why I think this idea of everything trickling down from the top, if you're working in an environment where the leaders are really buttoned up and are wearing masks, then you may not feel as safe to be yourself. And we know that that's harmful in terms of engagement and performance. And so that's why it's really important for leaders to feel empowered to really model that in the workplace. And so that's really the focus that we do on helping leaders think as much about being as they do about doing. And so really kind of shifting out of this kind of do performance-based mindset to really thinking about bringing their, really developing their full leadership self-concept and what it's going to take to inspire their team to be who they are so they can do great work. And it's sort of, a virtuous cycle in that way.
I love all that you said there. And it's so, I think it'd be so difficult because how does one become a good leader? Like you learn math, you learn, 1 + 1 = 2, you learn how to read.
Right.
But do we ever really learn how to be, or are we ever taught how to be a good leader? In fact, I think life often teaches us to do the opposite of what it is to be a good leader.
It's so funny that you say that because my daughter, who's 10 going on 11, is applying to middle school right now. And we just finished taking the SSAT, and she's in 5th grade. And so we lugged this Kaplan book around, on our trips over winter break, trying to teach her algebra and synonyms and all these things. And I'm thinking, what does this really measure about a person? What does this actually say about who this person is going to be in the world and what kind of leader she's going to be? And of course, there are some character essays where you kind of shine a light on that. But I do think that in a lot of ways, it's still pretty backwards, the way that we teach and what we teach. I think we're doing a better job. I know for sure that my kids are learning much more on the social emotional side than I did growing up. So I think that there's certainly more emphasis on that, which is really important. And these kids are learning to regulate their feelings and emotions in ways that we just were never taught to do. And you see that at work, right? That comes out. It's manifested in so many different ways in, interpersonal dynamics, when you have a conflict with somebody. I can't tell you how many adult tantrums we see and have to help navigate around because people, our generation, were just not taught the skills, right? And so that's how you become a leader. I think there's 2 pieces. One is really thinking about and defining who you really are as a person and as a leader, and then how to really bring that to life at work. So that's the being side. Who do I want to be? What kind of leader, inspired me? And then how do I want to show up to inspire my people? And then there's the more tactical side. So it's really giving people the toolkit, right, to do some of the things, to have some of the hard conversations, because we just weren't taught, to your point. And so a lot of people avoid hard conversations in part because it feels uncomfortable emotionally in our body. So we have to deal with that. And then we have to teach them the skills to actually do it. Because there are some people that are like, I would do it, I just don't really know how. And so we have all kinds of frameworks and tools that we share that just are not intended to be, rigid or regimented, but just serve as a guide to help practice having the hard conversation, or maybe think about structuring the conversation in a way that is productive.
Yeah, I think you probably can't be too rigid, because you can't possibly plan for every type of conversation and how the other person on the other side is going to react. So if it's too rigid, they're not going to be able to adapt in the moment, versus let's build you the skills.
Right.
And then you can update the formula as you go, given the situation. It's funny, though, you talk about emotions. Just recently on Facebook, I saw this meme of like the different generations and emotions, and it was like, the baby boomers, it's like, stuff your feelings down. And then I forget what some of the other generations were. I'm Generation X, so it really stood out to me. And it was the Gen X person was like, wait, emotions? What are those? Mm-hmm. Like we were told, I remember growing up, and I even started this with my kids until I learned to do better of, don't worry about that. Don't think about that. You're not going to be worrying about that in 2 months. So big deal. Get over it now, right?
Right.
And it's not the right way to do things.
We're all just trying to do the best we can, right? I was just listening to a podcast yesterday a book that was talking about this topic and how to deal with kids and their big feelings. And, they all have them. We all have feelings. It's just how we process them and how we're taught to process them. And I was like, oh, shoot, I screwed up on that one conversation. It happens. But I certainly have people in my family who are very triggered when any one of our kids cries and are like, sort of like, I'll give you something to cry about kind of mentality. And it's like, ugh. So there's that. And then sometimes it's, they sort of shame our kids for crying, and that's not helpful either. And so it's hard, especially when you're like, you've just gotten off of work and you have a lot on your mind, and your kid's crying because they want ice cream and you said no because it's before dinner, to be like, oh, it's okay that you feel disappointed that we're not having ice cream. That's a normal feeling. I'm going to let you sit here and process that on your own. So, we're all just trying to do the best that we can.
I just tell him, I'm sorry, your dad ate it all. And I just blame it on him and move on.
Oh, no, my kids want to stop for ice cream every day on the way home from school. I'm like, that's like a once in a while thing. Right. We're not going to do that every day, but you can have a meltdown every day that it doesn't happen if that's what you feel like doing.
So you work with companies, you work with individuals on teams. Is there a story or a situation that sticks out in your mind of how you were able to come in and help, or what you saw?
Yeah, let me think about that. There's so many.
Well, that's a good thing. Well, it's a good thing in that you're having that impact for others. Even if it's not specific, no names or whichever, but whether it's one that you thought this is going to be easy and it wasn't, or I'm not sure if this is going to work, and it surprised you.
Sure.
To kind of just that little bit of a story to share with people, because they may resonate with that or say, uh-oh, I think that's me.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we do is called energy management, and we're actually certified master practitioners of a framework called energy leadership. And so the word energy carries a lot of meaning for me. And I'm thinking about one particular instance where we worked with a leader who everybody was sort of unanimously like, this person is just an absolute star in terms of her performance and what she can do. But the way she shows up in conversations and when things get hard is just unacceptable at this point. And so, we really need to get her to a place where instead of reacting to stress, she's able to take a pause and take a breath and really respond in a more thoughtful, intentional way.
And what was that reaction to the stress? Was it getting angry? Was it shutting down, not talking? Was it not being able to do? What was her reaction to stress?
Some combination of both, depending on the situation. So in our world, so there's two kinds of energy. One we refer to as catabolic energy, which is really a stress-inducing, destructive, sometimes toxic kind of energy. And then there's anabolic energy, which is a more productive, synergistic, creative, free-flowing energy. So we all feel both, right? And we're hardwired to let's just say there's a line and we're either above the line or below the line, and we're hardwired to go below the line. So we like to normalize that because there's no judgment on it. It's really just a matter of raising awareness and helping people identify, oh, I'm below the line right now. Okay, what do I want to do with that? Am I ready to move back above the line? Maybe not. Sometimes we need a minute or an hour or a day. And so usually behaviors that come with that kind of catabolic stress reaction are either fight or flight, right? So sometimes it looks like avoidance or shutting down, and sometimes it looks like conflict or fighting or snapping at somebody, right? And this particular leader had a little bit of both, and we see both, and that's totally normal. And so, again, we all have that in us, and I know I react sometimes in not the most productive ways, especially with my family, frankly, because I feel more safe to do it there, right? But this particular leader was reacting a lot to stress at work, and it was causing a lot of conflict and tension. And it had sort of gotten to a place where, people didn't really want to work with her. Other leaders from other functional teams were really tired of that behavior, and it was causing some toxicity really in the entire office. And so, we worked with that leader. We have an assessment that is part of this framework. And so we did that assessment, and we also did a full 360, which means that we interviewed stakeholders that this person interacts with on a, regular basis, peers, direct reports, her leader, some external stakeholders, to paint a picture of what people think about her and how people perceive her at work, both in terms of her strengths. So we try to balance it. Like, what does this person do really well that you want to see her continue to do? And what does she not do as well that you think could be a derailer to her success as a leader? And so we shared all of that information with her, and it really helped raise her awareness around how other people were seeing her. And then we said, how are you experiencing this? How does this feel for you in those moments when you're feeling that stress and when you're having, a reaction? And so we really kind of pulled back the layers through coaching her. So we coached her for about 6 months, and that's typically how long our engagements are, because it takes about that long to create meaningful, long-lasting change. And she just really soared. And I think, what stands out to me about why she was so successful through coaching, she's really smart, she was really self-aware, and she was willing to be vulnerable. So I think those are sort of the trifecta of components that make somebody a really great candidate for coaching and leadership development. And in her particular case, she really was willing to go there and really understand what were the stories that she was telling herself in those moments where she was reacting to stress. How true were they, right? Like, everything feels true for us when we're experiencing it, but is it like capital T true? And so she really started to shift her stories that she was creating for herself and some of the beliefs that she had picked up about who she was and how she fit into the world and this work environment that she was in, and to challenge herself to think differently. And in doing so, she was able to, be like the button doesn't, when you press it, it's not as triggering when you sort of examine why the button is there and what it is. And so she really expanded in her leadership, and people in the office really noticed it. And as a result, she was able to expand the size of her team. She got promoted, and she just felt more at ease at work, more confident, less heavy, because that energy is really heavy. Like, we all feel it. We all know what that feels like. And if you're experiencing that a lot at work or really anywhere, it's just really heavy.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting. Yeah. And so that would be a great example of a client success story, somebody that we worked with, that framework. And then we use that framework with teams too. So an example I could share of using it with a team is we were working with a senior leadership team, and we do a lot of teaming work. And so we had done a lot of work to establish what we call the 6 team conditions. And so we put those in place, and we were coaching the team in real time. And what we were experiencing when we were in the room with the team is that they were reactive to each other. So something would come up, somebody would say something, somebody else would react. And then it was just like, blah, 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 like this back and forth. And you could just feel the tension and the temperature building in the room. And they really were sort of stuck in it. Like there was no way that they were going to get out of it. We had to clear the room and kind of come back next week and start the conversation over, which had them just circling the wagon over and over and over again and not really able to progress anything or make any hard decisions. And so we were like, time out. Let's talk about what's going on here, because this is what we're experiencing. Does anybody else feel the temperature rising in this room? It was pretty impossible not to feel it. And so we used that same framework with the team. So everybody took the assessment. We explained, what does above the line energy feel like? What does below the line energy feel like? And what's happening in these moments for everybody where you guys are getting so reactive with each other. And so that really helped them, again, build their awareness so that they could understand what was happening in those moments. It really gave them a common language to use with each other to kind of reset, like, oh, this feels below the line. What's going on for us right now? And are we ready to move above the line? What would we need to do to move back above the line so that we can move forward with this conversation and make a decision? And so that was really forwarding for them, and they were able to really start to see themselves differently. And that's part of the goal of the work, right? To help leaders and to help teams see themselves differently and to really see what's possible for them and also what's keeping them stuck.
I love that example there where you talk about the line, right? So there's this thing that everyone knows about and you can call out because you all know it's there. You all know something's off. Mm-hmm. And if you're not talking about it, maybe you don't have the words to identify it, but to be able to, as a team, say, whoa, here's the line. Mm-hmm. Where are we? And are we ready to make a shift? I bet that's hugely impactful in a sort of level setting or getting everybody on the same plane and just calling it out.
Right. And in a way that depersonalizes it too. So I think, it takes on sort of a personalization when you don't have a healthy language to talk about it. So it's like, ooh, you're being really toxic, right? Or like, why'd you say that mean thing in there? But this is really, we put a lot of emphasis on normalizing that this is how everybody is hardwired, right? So there's no judgment about it, and it's not personal. It's just what people do, and it's what people who come together in teams do. It's just part of being human at home and in the workplace. And so there's nothing wrong with it. We just need to be able to identify it and, like you said, name it and say, this is what's happening for us. What do we want to do now? And
I love the we part. I'm even thinking, like, how can I use this at home? Mm-hmm. Like, are we below the line right now? Do we need to wait, cool off? Mm-hmm. What do we need to get above the line? As you said, then I feel like that depersonalizes, not like you're below the line, I'm definitely above the line.
Right. Well, it takes two or more to tango, right? So I think it really puts ownership on the team or the group to share that responsibility for setting the temperature and the energy in the room, no matter whether it's at home or in the boardroom or anywhere else.
And some of the things you mentioned there were is the story that you're telling yourself really true? Mm-hmm. And if somebody is just listening to this on audio, which is usually how I do my podcast, you actually made the big T, right? You actually made what we would, and you did it later in the conversation with the timeout, like, because when you did the big T for truth, I thought, oh, that's perfect for timeout too. That could be a trigger to say, wait a minute, my mind is going, what's really true here? Timeout, pause, take a breath, get out of the story, rethink this here, because so many times, and I forget, there's listen to so many books, there's a woman who mentioned something where you get to the, is that really true? Mm-hmm. Is, if I don't make it home by 5 o'clock, my family's going to disown me. Is that really true? Mm-hmm. Like, if you sit back and think about it, so that, almost that hand gesture of the big T, the truth, the timeout, like using that to stop your brain.
Yes.
And sit back and really
take a pause and challenge what you're thinking. Yeah. And in a group or team setting or a family setting, I can almost guarantee you the truth for every person is different. So, it's like, what's going on for everybody right now, and what is actually true for us, right? And what needs to be true, for us to be moving forward in this conversation and not get stuck here and just swirl around and then start blaming and pointing the finger.
And I imagine you mentioned working with that woman, that individual. So much of probably coaching and a lot of what we do is therapy, getting beneath the layers to say, what is it? What's the reason that I react this way? Or what is the reason that I go to the world's going to end whenever I'm confronted with a challenge?
Right.
And really going deep to figure out what is that underlying thing I need to address that's 5 layers deep.
Yes.
Of actually my reaction.
Yes. So we do always try to be careful to distinguish therapy from coaching, and they are different, but I would say there's a Venn diagram and there's an overlap. And so you're not wrong. That's,
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. So therapy really is more focused on the past and kind of how you got to where you are. And then coaching is really primarily focused on the future. So where are we now and where are we trying to go, whether that relates to an individual or a team. And there's some overlap there, right? Like how you got to where you are colors who you are now and what you think and what you believe and some of the stories that you create for yourself. So we do need to unpack and examine some of that, because usually what keeps people stuck in low energy is, we call them the Gales, Gail. The G is the gremlin, so the inner critic voice that keeps you, small and safe. And that comes from the past. Oftentimes it is a voice from the past. So sometimes it does feel like therapy when we're sort of unpacking and examining what that voice sounds like. The A is assumptions. So assumptions that we make about, a situation, like, well, it happened this way once, so it's going to happen this way every single time. The I is interpretations. So those are the stories, right? The interpretations that we make about why you said that thing that you said to me and what you must have meant, even though I'm not asking you and I have no idea what you actually meant. And then the L is limiting beliefs. And those are those beliefs that feel true for us, but aren't objectively true, and that usually keep us, they're more limiting than what's actually true.
Like imposter syndrome and things like that really aren't actually true. Is potentially limiting you?
Yeah, exactly. I think usually when imposter syndrome is at play, the gremlin is also at play, because it's the inner critic that's telling you you're not good enough and you're not smart enough, or whatever the blank is, not blank enough. Limiting beliefs are something like, let's just say somebody is not happy in their career and they're making a lot of money. And so they have the golden handcuffs, and they're like, well, it's not possible for me to find something that I would actually be happy to do and make enough money to support my family. That's just objectively not true, right? It feels true for them because that's sort of the universe that they're living in and the story that they're creating for themselves, but it's just objectively not true. I could tell you 10 examples right now of people who are absolutely gloriously happy in their lives and making enough money and more. So that's an example of a limiting belief.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, so much of you didn't go to college to do the earth-shattering work that you're doing now, the transformative work that you're doing now. You went to law school.
Right.
Which again, I think, now there's really just, one, you're never too old to start something new, to, live in your purpose and meaning. So, and just that linear path, staying in the same career, often you can't predict when you start something where you're going to end up, which I think is just something that needs to be shared because so many of us go through it. But you went to school to be a lawyer.
I did.
And were you, from a young age, like what made you decide I want to be a lawyer?
Oh gosh. I didn't always want to be a lawyer. I didn't grow up saying I want to be a lawyer. Nobody in my family really was a lawyer. So it wasn't like, oh, my dad was a lawyer, my grandfather. No, it wasn't that either. I think it was just, a combination of things. I think I was, there was this picture of success that was painted for me. And I thought that being a lawyer matched that picture of success. It was sort of like, You could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, you could be like all these different kinds of professionals. And I think as I think about all the little different pieces of like, the crumbs that I was picking up along the way subconsciously that painted that picture for me, there were little things that people said, right? Like I wanted to, first of all, I went to college to major in psychology. So I always have been obsessed with human behavior. And that's really what I wanted to do.
That makes a lot of sense.
It did come full circle. But I really didn't like intro to psych. It was like very theoretical. And so I kind of put that to the side. And then I got really interested in philosophy. And I remember my dad being like, philosophy? Well, you can basically like wipe your butt with a philosophy degree. Like, good luck to you, And so then it's like people say things to you that they might mean innocuously or maybe not. But you pick up all of these projections of what other people think you should do, and you create this picture for yourself, and then you just start running towards that. And so that's kind of what I did. That's not to say that my skills weren't aligned with practicing law. I'm super analytical and strategic, and so I was gravitating towards more very writing intensive classes and ones that were sort of based in logic, like argumentation. And I majored in political science. So it felt sort of like at the time, it felt like a natural progression. And it also served this idea that I have of what it meant to be successful. And so, I went to law school and I became a lawyer, and I practiced law for 10 years and I really loved it. And in a lot of ways, it was very aligned with my skill set and how I thought I wanted to be showing up in the world. And the tricky thing about it is that it really did give me a lot of energy. I liked it a lot and I was good at it. But I just felt like there was this little nagging voice in my head that was like, but are you really happy doing this? Like, how long are you really going to do this? What if, you did something else that gave you more freedom, or I don't know. It was just like, it was not a clear voice. It was like, and I wasn't miserable, but I did have sort of a low grade fever that was like slowly inching up over time. And I think, your soul is always sort of nudging you in the direction of like where you're actually supposed to go. And so, after 10 years, I had like a total reckoning with myself.
Was it in one moment, an aha light bulb, you picture the light bulb over your head, or was it just a series of things that said that this is it, I'm done being a lawyer?
No, it was not an aha. That would have been really nice, Cynthia. I could have saved a lot of money on all the therapy and coaches and, psychics.
You mean it's not like the cartoons back in the 80s, 90s,
No, it took me a while to figure out what was this feeling. Oh my gosh, I went to law school for 3 years to be a lawyer. Am I really going to give up this well-paid job to do ? I mean, I didn't even know what else I would do or could do.
And I wonder if, because you mentioned there was this idea of success that was painted sort of for you by many different sources. Mm-hmm. At any point, was that like, if I don't do the lawyer thing, then I'm not a success, or what?
Oh, 100%. Yes. I really had to detach my sense of self from what it meant to be a lawyer. And I recognized that I worked at 2 different firms. And when I left my first firm, I took a little bit of a break so that I could find the right fit, the right next fit. And in that time in my life, I sort of found myself where people would be like, so what do you do? I was like, well, I'm a lawyer, but I'm not working now, but don't worry, I'm going back. And I was like, what am I saying? Like, why is it so important to me to explain to people, I'm still a lawyer. Don't you forget I'm a lawyer, even though I'm not currently practicing right now. I'm going back, and I'll tell you exactly when I will. So I was like, ooh, that doesn't feel good. I need to sort of examine what's going on there. And then I did practice for another 5 years. But, I think part of what was hard was really acknowledging that my sense of self and my whole ego was really wrapped up in what it meant to be a lawyer. Not that anybody else cared. Only I cared. But
you got to find the T, the big T, the truth there.
Exactly. Yeah. So these are the limiting beliefs, right, that we create for ourselves. Like, this example that I gave earlier was certainly a limiting belief that I had. Like, oh, I could never do something that actually made me happy and helps support my family, right? That's
and be
just
considered
not true.
Successful. A success out from society.
Yes. So part of my passion for coaching really is a result of my own experience of it, because like I said, I paid a lot of money for all these helpers. I had a lot of therapy. I went to psychics. I was like, just tell me what to do. And really it was coaching that was the most transformative for me, because the philosophy in coaching is really, you're the expert on your life. The coach is not the expert. The coach is the guide, right? And you have an inner knowing and an inner wisdom about who you are and what you really want and what really matters to you. And the coach's job is really to help pull that to the surface in a way that sometimes we're just unable to do on our own. And so I had a lot of people telling me what I should do, but that was just replacing one should for another. And so it was really coaching that helped me discover myself again, right? Like I had shoved down that part of myself and that inner wisdom and intuition because I was so busy listening to like what the world wanted for me, what my family wanted for me, what success looked like, that I couldn't even hear my own voice anymore. And so it was coaching that really helped me rediscover that again. And for me, it was just totally transformative. And so I thought, gosh, once I had done that work on myself and really got the clarity that I needed to move forward, I just started to see people everywhere in my life who I just knew that they felt exactly the same way that I did, but they didn't know what to do about it. And so that was really kind of the birth of my interest in becoming a coach. And then I became certified while I was still practicing law and was, developing that interest and really talking to my firm about what it would look like to create some form of a coaching practice within our firm. And I was like beating my drum about culture and engagement. And at one point, the top leader in our firm was like, well, that's really great. But you know what I care about? How does your cog turn the wheel? And that's when I was like, yeah, that's where you're wrong. I don't want to be a cog in your wheel. And in fact, I don't think anybody else does either. So I need to go do this work in an environment where people get it, where the model is really designed to support leadership development and engagement and helping people really connect with their purpose and their passion. And that's not here. So that's what I did.
So you're married, and I know your kids are 7 and 10 now, but rewind to when you decide I'm not going to be a lawyer anymore. What was it? Did your husband have an idea, like, no, it was coming, or what was that conversation like? Well, and maybe to others in your life, parents or whoever, like, good luck with that philosophy degree.
Right. That's a great question. So like I said, I think people kind of have this perception that like I just decided I wasn't going to practice law and then I just launched this business. That's not what happened. It took a while to figure out what I wanted to do and then to dip my toe into coaching, get certified. I was having lots of conversations with people about, okay, now what? Like, what do I do with this? What are all the different possibilities? Do I want to go work inside of a company that has a robust leadership development department, or do I want to go out on my own? And it took a while. And it was certainly a conversation that I was having with my husband for a long, long time. And I think it took him a while to sort of adjust to the idea. And at one point I was like, I don't feel like you're being supportive. And he's like, no, I support you. I want you to do whatever you want to do. And we're going to work to make that happen. He's an accountant, by the way. So he's like, let me just explain how this works. Like, the ins have to equal the outs, or we have a problem. And that was something that was keeping me stuck too. I was like, I know, like, what am I supposed to do about that? Am I just supposed to be stuck here forever? And he really helped me kind of identify some of the limiting beliefs that I had around that. And he was like, no, we built this life. We've made choices. we can make different choices, right? Like, we're not stuck here. We can downsize our house. We can drive different cars. We can not send our kids to private school. These are all choices. We're not stuck in them, but we need to have a conversation about it and be intentional about what we're choosing so that the ins equal the outs, because, otherwise we'll have a problem. So yeah, we had to work out that piece, and I had to wait probably longer than I wanted to wait to make sure that some other ducks were in a row so that I could make sure that I wasn't going to cause my family to, default on our mortgage. But it panned out. And so this was in the summer of 2019. He actually got a new job. So why do one thing at a time, right? Let's just do everything all at once. So he got a new job, and I actually had a trial that I was prepping for. And it was, oddly enough, the biggest trial of my entire career. It was a copyright infringement case against Katy Perry and a bunch of music defendants in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And this case had been going on for over 5 years, and I was like, I can't just leave. Like, this case, it wasn't settling. I was like, I think it's going to go to trial, and I cannot just drop this. I have to see this through. And so I knew that I was going to be leaving after this, and I went out to LA. My son was a year old, and my daughter was 4.5 at the time. And I was out there for 3 weeks. I did not come home. And we tried that case. It was the wildest experience of my entire legal career. We got a jury verdict for our client. So we were successful. And I came home and I gave my notice.
Wow. What a story.
It's a story.
Well, I think it's something important you mentioned in your story, and it resonates with the conversations that my husband and I have had, shockingly somewhat recently, is that fear, limiting belief. When you get so far in life and you have kids and there's responsibilities and bills and you've built this life, that do you stay stuck because of the money situation, or, insert whatever's keeping you stuck
right
in that moment? Do you?
It's a choice. Everyone has that choice, and there's a lot of different factors that play into the choice, right? We all are dealing with a different situation. But a quote from Elizabeth Gilbert comes to mind. She says, you have to relentlessly pursue happiness. And I think that's, we tend to think that our jobs will make us happy, or, when I achieve this, then I'll be happy. And if I have 2.5 kids, then I'll be happy. And if we go on X number of trips, then I'll be happy. And, I think that's part of my experience, that I kind of set this image of what happiness was going to look like. And then I achieved everything that I wanted to achieve. And I was like, this doesn't feel the way I want it to feel. And that's a really hard moment. And I think a lot of people get to that place and they do choose to stay stuck, whether, for any number of reasons, they don't have the tools or resources to do anything about it, or they don't have the courage that it takes to really, get quiet with yourself about what you really want and make a choice, or whatever other reason, right? But it's always a choice. And I think it's on each of us to really relentlessly pursue our own happiness, even when we think we're pursuing it and we get there and it doesn't make us happy. Then, we have to adjust course and be willing to do that.
Well, I think that goes back to something you said before of, who am I really? What really makes me happy, tick? And that is I don't think most people have answered that question. Who am I? And I didn't probably know, and I'm probably still working it out until my 40s, of who am I, because I think we're taught, conditioned, especially as women, to be like, I'm mom, I'm wife, I'm, taxi driver, craft person extraordinaire, whatever it might be, that you're used to having these roles, and that's what success is. That's who you are. But really getting down deep into who you are, Gay Hendricks, I think it was, talked about zone of genius. So what is it that, no matter what you've done in life, was sort of what made you tick. You know, some things for me, because I'm sure some people are like, well, what is that? And I'm going to ask you what that is, or how do we ask that, answer that? How did your coach help you get to that? But, you know, things for me was always like, I remember in high school, a kid saying, I'm going to call you Smiley because you're smiling all the time. Like, I want to be happy. I want to be smiling. Like, I volunteered one summer at a local, like, Goodwill sort of place, thrift shop. And they were like, oh, are you on probation? Why are you volunteering? And I'm like, what are you talking about, probation? Well, I found out later that a lot of high school's kids who volunteered was because they were forced to. So, you know, thinking back to, you know, for me, it was helping people. And it's like, duh, I've got to be in a career where I'm really helping people. Or what I do in life is I love to help people. So when you sit back, it's a small question, but a really big question.
It's such a big question.
Who am I?
Right.
How did you, what was pivotal, or how'd you get there?
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to acknowledge that I think it's not unusual to be in your 30s or 40s or even later and start sort of asking yourself that question, because you're exactly right. We're not taught to lead with that. We're not taught to really embody who we are and really own it and feel value in it. I think we're sort of born whole, and then we learn very shortly thereafter that we're not. And we have to do all these things to sort of prove our wholeness and prove our worthiness, including achieving and striving and grinding and serving all these roles that you just talked about perfectly, right? And a lot of times it takes a certain chunk of life to get to a place where it's like, what am I doing? Something is not feeling right. Like, whether it's the low grade fever that I was feeling, or just a sense of something being off. And for me, it was that period of time where I, you know, was doing a lot of soul searching. And again, like, I think people see this transition that I make and they're like, oh, you just like had the courage to go do that. And it's like, no, I went through some hard times, some very hard times. And, you know, it's a pretty depressing thing to realize that this path that you're on, that you think is where you're supposed to be going, is not the path. Like, you put the ladder against the wrong wall and now you're at the top and you're like, shoot, I'm looking down. What do I just jump off? So I think, you know, you really have to be willing to like feel the icky feelings that come with that and kind of sit with it and just get to know yourself again. The first thing that I did was I actually signed up for a 3-day yoga retreat. It was in the mountains of North Georgia. And I don't know, just on an impulse, I was like, I'm going to go to this thing because I feel I'm so unhappy, especially now that I've identified that this isn't it for me, but I don't know what else is. And I feel so busy and so like wrapped up in all these roles that I'm playing that I can't even think. Like, I didn't even know how to figure out the next step because I didn't have time to think about it. And I didn't have like the brain space to think about it. So I was like, I just have to get out of here. So I went to this yoga retreat and it was a bunch of strangers. And that really sparked something for me. I feel like I was really just living on the periphery of my life. And that was really the first time where I started to see myself again. Like, I was like, okay, there's somebody under there. And I feel very far away right now, but I'm going to get to know her again. And so that's what I did for those 3 days. And then when I left there, it was like, okay, how can I keep this going? And that's when, you know, I hired a coach, and I really needed a guide because oftentimes we do. We can't usually, or sometimes we find it difficult to really work through and process some of those big questions on our own without somebody holding up a mirror and really reflecting back to us what they're hearing and what they're seeing, and, you know, maybe some of the things that we're saying that we can't even hear ourselves say.
It's something I did recently with my husband. I'm the type that, you know, I think a lot in my head, and even some thoughts of, well, if I don't say it out loud, it's not really there. Or I don't have to confront it, right? Or I don't have to talk about it. Or people aren't going to see this until I say it out loud. So if I don't say it out loud, it's not there. But I remember talking to my husband about something in particular, and I just had texted him something like, you know, I just, in this space, I feel like such an underachiever. And I had never, so as you're talking about, you need someone else sometimes to help you get out of your head and talk through things, guide, ask questions. It has been a recent journey of mine where I think it is really sharing these things with somebody to get them out, to talk through them, process them. And, you know, who knows what's really underneath, but being that vulnerable person, even with yourself, right?
Yes.
Because you know what you're thinking. Like, you could tell yourself all day long, like, you know, whatever, like, I don't want that cookie. Well, you know, really, you want that cookie. It's just, you know, so like, be honest with yourself. But I think it was about like asking for help and talking about these things and just saying, I can't do it all by myself. I need someone else to help me work through this.
Yeah.
Is probably a big part of getting to another place with a coach or whoever.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that you say that. I think about that a lot because I think in this phase of life, like, we're all so busy. We're working, we're chasing after kids, or maybe caring for parents, or, you know, there's just so much. And, you know, the Surgeon General has said that loneliness is an epidemic in our society. And I don't think that means you're lonely because you're not around people. It means that you're lonely with your thoughts. And, you know, that can feel really lonely. And I think about that. Like, I see people all the time, but how often am I really sharing? People are sharing with me their innermost thoughts, but how often am I really sharing with somebody, right? And like getting all the thoughts out of my head, because you have thousands, tens of thousands of thoughts a day, and most of them are not true. And sometimes all you need is somebody who's there to reflect back and go, well, that's not true. Like, you're not an underachiever at all. Like, by no stretch of the imagination are you an underachiever, right? But when you think that, it feels true for you. And so there's actually I think it was some kind of reel that I saw that Simon Sinek did, and it really struck me, and I shared it with a number of friends. He said he was talking to a friend, a really close friend of his, who turned out to be sick, like she was dealing with some kind of illness. And he was like, I can't believe you didn't tell me that. I thought we were such close friends. Why would you not tell me that? And she was like, well, I tried. And he checked his messages and it was like, can we talk? Can we get together for coffee? I'd love to see you. But never was she like, I need to talk to you. I have something that I want to share with you. And he kind of just blew it off because he was busy. And so he said, you know, in this world of loneliness, research shows that it only takes 8 minutes for somebody to feel less lonely. 8 minutes of connection. And so he created this agreement with his friend that they would just say, do you have 8 minutes? Because everybody has 8 minutes. And so that's something that I've been sharing with people that are close to me in my life, because I know sometimes we trade phone calls and with the best of intentions, we try to connect, but sometimes it doesn't happen. And it's like, I always have 8 minutes for anybody in my life.
And I saw that reel and I thought that was really interesting.
Wasn't that powerful?
Because I've had people on the podcast too who have said, you know, again, there's this thing of either I need to look perfect, that I have it all together, or I don't want to bother. Like, my biggest thing is always, well, I don't want to bother that person.
Exactly.
I don't want to burden that person, or I don't want them to think I'm only reaching out when I have issues. Layered on a lot of the other things we already talked about.
Right.
Yet they said, you know, again, I love when I can help a friend.
Yeah.
So why do I think I'm burdening them or putting it on them?
Right.
And again, somebody had said, you know, don't rob them of the ability to help you.
To be there for you.
And when you boil it down to, even if it's just 8 minutes, like, I tell myself this, be succinct, get it out real fast. But even just that outreach for 8 minutes, what a difference it can make.
Totally.
In that close relationship, in understanding yourself, again, getting back to that who am I sort of thing, like, get it out.
Yeah, you got to get it out to somebody.
Is that, you know, that realization of that low grade fever, is that one of the biggest challenges, that learning lessons throughout your journey? Do you have others that were aha moments that have created the Lauren that you are today?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, I'd love to say that all of my problems disappeared when I left the legal profession, and it's just all been, rainbows and cupcakes, but that's just not true. And I think one of the big lessons that I had once I had fully transitioned and was running my company was that I realized that a lot of that conditioned behaviors and the way that I was working followed me. And so a lot of that was either learned and stuck, or, it really was never, the legal profession to begin with. It was just kind of how I'm wired. And so I actually had another coach reflect that to me. I was probably 6 to 9 months in, and she was like, you are working the same way that you were working when you were a lawyer. Just listen to yourself. She's like, you have a terrible boss. And that's you. Like, stop. And I was like, ooh, that's painful to hear.
What was it specifically, especially, you have a terrible boss and that's you. Mm-hmm. What was it that you were repeating that was bad, toxic, whichever?
I think just this sense of like grinding and, it never being enough. Right. I had a very unhealthy relationship with time, as you can imagine, because I build my time in 6-minute increments for 10 years. And so when I first left, and I really didn't have much business coming in, I was just trying to get my business up and going. I was doing all these things, and I was like, I feel like such a failure. I'm working, but like I'm not accomplishing anything. And I had nobody to bill time to. So I was like, gosh, like my whole relationship with time needs to be completely rewired. And the way that I approach my day even needs to be rewired, because I used to just like address the first thing on the list that was like sort of easy to check off, but it wasn't really in any form of priority. I really just didn't have a healthy approach to my day. So those are a couple of pieces. And then just generally speaking, I think it just never was enough. And when you're your own boss, there's really no parameters, there's nobody setting boundaries for you or saying, good job, you did it. And so I wasn't celebrating how far I'd come. I was only feeling bad about how far I still had to go. And I just never felt like enough. And I was wanting everything to be perfect and questioning everything and comparing myself to other people who were out there doing similar work. And I really had to detach myself from the matrix. I was very much working like I'm still working 9 to 5. I get dressed, I go to work, I function in this way that I was living in my corporate life. And I was my own boss. Like I didn't have to do that. And so I think actually COVID hit about 6 months in for me. And that was very helpful. I would not say that I would not wish for COVID, like lots of bad things came out of it. But I think that I really realized during COVID that I really value freedom, like in a huge way. And in fact, it might be my primary motivator in life, that I want to be free. I think at my core, I'm a free spirit. I don't want to be told what to do. I don't want to feel locked in or tied down. And that includes in my work day. And so my schedule has changed a lot since then. My business has changed a lot since then, because what I learned was that even once I had a thriving solo coaching practice, I had really created a job for myself. I really hadn't built a sustainable business. Unless I was there doing the work, the business wasn't really functioning. And so we've expanded both our service offerings and our team, number one, so that we can have more of an impact in our, in the world and in the client organizations that we serve, but also because what I really love is being a strategist and a partner to our clients. And so I can really live in that space that is really my zone of genius, if you want to go back to that phrase, and also have more freedom in my workday. And so our team really is built up of a lot of people who are incredibly bright and have tremendous amount of experience and want freedom in their schedule. And so it just works for us. But that's a big lesson that I had to learn, and I had to learn it the hard way. And it's, I'm still learning that. I'm still trying to figure out where can I find more freedom, where can I create more ease and flow in my work? Where am I making it harder for myself than I need to? Where can I delegate and also give up control? Because that's still really hard for me.
I like how you talked a little bit softer there, like it was a secret.
Yeah, that part feels hard still. I'm learning and
I'm sure that's
relearning.
different too, like going from being an attorney, a lot of having to control things and organization and getting things done, then building your own business to then creating success there and recognizing, wait a minute, it's not exactly how I want this. I'm going to join with some other people. And now how do I pivot and flex a little bit to allow them to do their skills to enhance what I really want to do?
Yep.
I mean, yeah, I would think that control and delegation can be challenging for business owners, entrepreneurs who, when you start, you have to do it all.
Yes.
Because you can't have anybody. And then as you're adding in people to grow it, scale it, it's hard probably to let some of that go.
Exactly. Yeah, it is. It's a challenge. I recently read the book Who Not How by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Ben Hardy. And I think, all of their books are really tremendous, but that one in particular really helped me kind of rethink the how of building a business. Like, I don't need to figure it all out on my own. I can muscle through a lot of things, but that doesn't mean that I should. And so, I've made a lot of strategic investments in our business because I want to bring in somebody that has a skill set that I don't have. I'm really not a process or a systems person, but in order to scale a business, you do need to have processes and systems. And sometimes I'm like, oh, but the freedom part my freedom feels suffocated when it's too process oriented. And I'm learning that those two things can coexist. And actually, when we have more process and we have more systems and people know what they need to do and can do it on their own, I feel more free. So it's like this great paradox that I'm trying to sit with right now. But yeah, it is tricky. It's tricky to navigate, and it's tricky to continue to work through for myself. And I have a mindset coach, right? Like, coaches need coaches because you can't see the spinach in your own teeth. So sometimes you just need help having somebody reflect back what's getting in your way. But yeah, those things still continue to come up for me. I have, the gremlin voice comes in too and is telling me I'm not doing enough or I'm not growing fast enough. And I think, no matter where we sit in our jobs, in our careers, the world is a harsh place. And there are so many messages out there, especially with social media and filters and the way that everything is supposed to look and feel and sound. And you really have to kind of build a muscle to challenge all of that and kind of really stay grounded in yourself. And that's, for me, that's an everyday practice. It's not I have not cracked that code yet. I think, it's a journey and the journey never ends. And some days I'm feeling on top of the world and other days I'm at the bottom of the pit of despair. And I'm just trying to claw my way back out. So, I've really had to find rituals and practices that keep me grounded, and also a community too. I've got my support people, I've got my team, I've got my community, and I've got a pretty solid, ritual, I think, that helps keep me grounded. So I think it's, it takes all those things.
And it's one where, as you said, every day is not going to be the same. Some days we're going to feel better on top of the world than others, and to not shoot yourself for those moments or those times where you're not just firing on all pistons,
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, such a great conversation today. The, asking for help, bringing in help, sitting with yourself, self-care, whatever that might be, because if we burn ourselves too much or we're not greasing the wheels every now and then, we'll burn out.
Totally.
We'll burn out and die, and it's no good for anyone in our lives, and certainly can't capture the happiness or the joy from there.
Right.
Gosh,
and then you wonder, what's it all for anyway at the end of the day?
Yeah. And I love, again, I've already resonated with a lot of things you've said. And I know so many people, especially I think women, are going to resonate with this, like, what I should be. I should be happy because look at everything I have and look what society says. Oh, well, they're happy with all that. Why am I not happy with all this? And that sort of out of alignment, low grade fever.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And taking that time to voice what's going on and have help. I mean, oh my gosh, I could just go back and just recap the entire episode because there were so many good pieces, but we can't do that because we're already well over an hour. And again, I never know how these episodes going to go, but so many great things, Gail, all that stuff. I'm going to need to re-listen to this several times. And if others are listening and are like, wow, I know people who need to talk to Lauren, or my company needs to talk to her, or I need coaching. How do people find you and your whole group? I mean, how many of them are there to be able to reach out to with your whole consulting group?
So there's 8 of us right now. We have 8 practitioners, which is really exciting. The best way to find us is you can always find me on LinkedIn. So that's in terms of social media, usually where I'm hanging out. And then on our website, so www.cohenleadershipgroup.com, and you can shoot us a message. My email is lauren@cohenleadershipgroup.com, so that's fair game too.
Well, thank you again for coming in. I know we had to do a retry with some different things in the past. I'm so glad.
Yeah, it was like a year ago that I was supposed to be here, so I'm glad we could make it work.
Again, and maybe this timing was meant to be with everything. So can't wait for this to be released. Thank you.
Thank you
for being open and sharing so much information that we can learn from.
Thank you for having me.
This concludes another episode of the She Lift Project podcast. To hear more episodes of the show, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And to learn more about our mission of helping women reach higher levels of success, visit sheliftproject.com and sign up to receive the latest news, ebooks, videos, and more.